Hello there, my name is Anthony Barocas of Aiba Communications, and today I'm excited to do a walk around the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. It is a mouthful. It's a big name for a small camcorder, but with a lot of features packed into it, especially now with the 6.1 update. Let's take a look. All right, take two. I've plugged the camera in because the battery is running low. This is the second time going through this whole thing, and hopefully this time is a charm. Fire this baby up. Right now we're on AC, but the 6.1 update of the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera, or the P4K, really addressed one of the main sticking points, one of the main pinch points of the camera is that Blackmagic, for whatever reason, designed a 4K video camera around a battery designed for a still camera that was not designed for constant high amperage draw, and they built it on a tiny little Canon battery. What I was getting well under an hour out of a Canon battery, third-party batteries even a little bit less, and with the 6.1 update, that battery runtime is an hour and 17 minutes. And that is way better. That is a huge amount of optimization in the camera. And it really shows Blackmagic is really invested in making this thing better for end users. With well over an hour for a battery, that, starts to get into the comfortable realm. Me personally, I would have loved to see them use a bigger battery like this that's designed for camcorder use and put that in the grip, maybe make the grip a little taller, or maybe make a battery grip underneath that'll hold two of these and then power the camera through a dummy battery and screw into the bottom. Hey, there's an option. So I'm going to walk around this camera, and I also have several recommendations based on my use experience with this camera, and hopefully Blackmagic is still listening to user feedback. So thanks to Blackmagic for the 6.1 update and the battery improvements. That is fantastic. On the back of this thing, you've got this big 5-inch touchscreen monitor, and it's sort of like an Atmos Ninja with a camera attached to it. So you've got the high quality recording, the raw recording, and a camera in one unit. So it's a little bulkier than your DSLR with a 3-inch screen, but having this big screen sort of pays off. The downside is it's not tiltable, it's not adjustable, and in my experience, it's pretty darn reflective. I mean, if we go over here to this other camera view, you can see if I move this along, I've got a light over here, and this camera is indeed reflecting the light, and the light isn't even on axis. I was outdoors filming I do real estate houses, and I was shooting a house and outdoors in the sunlight. Really, I had a problem, and the specific problem I had was seeing whether it was recording or not. Because on the back of the unit, the only indication of recording is an on-screen counter change and a little red dot, or a dot that goes from gray to red. Luminance-wise, that's not a big change. Color-wise, it's a change, but luminance-wise, it's not a big change. And there's no flashing LED light that says, I'm recording now. And that would be much better than just the on-screen changes. Another way around that would be, this has a speaker in it, and my GH4 has the ability, it beeps once when I start recording, and it beeps twice when I stop recording. It also lets me know whether I've started or stopped. So if I hit the button to start recording and it stops, that means I've got my button reversed. Adding in a future firmware update, maybe, audio feedback for both starting recording, stopping recording, and focus would be really good, because if you touch the screen to focus, it'll focus. You get these you get the little square appears on the screen for a moment. But again, if you can't really see the screen, you don't know. There's no confirmation from the camera that I have indeed found focus. It could try and fail, and then you don't know. So I would really love to hear an audio feedback saying, did it, I've got focus, like a still camera does. There's a lot of things still cameras get right that this has yet to really fully realize. The touchscreen itself, let's go back over here to close up. The touchscreen itself is laid out really well. It's very fast, it's very fluid, it's very functional. I have to say, you know, I'm very impressed with how Blackmagic has put this together. They've got shutter, so you can adjust your shutter speeds down here. You've got your aperture right here. You've got your ISO, so you can drag this slider. You could touch the arrows, or on the front of the camera, there's actually a jog dial, or a little dial. You can roll this very quickly back and forth. Now, and this leads me to another little complaint I have of the camera, in that a DSLR is going to have two of them, one for aperture, one for shutter, and you can roll them back and forth. If you're outdoors, there's three things that can help you adjust for compensate the exposure. Like if I'm filming someone standing in front of a camera and I want that shallow depth of field and the sun is going in and out behind clouds and I have to quickly change my exposure. The only thing that you can have on that dial is aperture, and aperture has changing your aperture is going to have a profound effect on what your shot looks like, from a shallow depth of field to deep depth of field, from shallow depth of field to deep depth of field. I don't want to change my aperture. Whereas if I change the shutter from 1/60th of a second to 1/1000th of a second for a talking head, you're not going to see it. If you change the ISO from 1200 down to 100, from 1200 down to 100, and on this camera, you're not going to see it. So I would love to see a future firmware update make it assignable what the dial controls, so that if I choose to have the dial on shutter speed, then the dial is always on shutter speed. If I choose to have the dial on ISO, then the dial is always on ISO and on the direction I want to turn it, because some people like turning it in different directions. Now, another key reason that's important is because, let's go to close up, is if you don't have, what do I got here? Shutter, let's go turn this off. If I leave it like it is, there's a histogram in the bottom corner here. And if I roll the dial here, let's fuzz it out a little bit. If I roll this dial, you can see how the exposure changes, and you can see, oh, I'm starting to clip. You can see absolutely what your exposure is if something is clipping on the top or on the bottom. That histogram is your absolute image assessment on this camera. It would be nice if when I bring up the ISO, now I can't see the histogram. I can still adjust my shutter speed, but I have no really way of knowing absolutely whether I'm now clipping or not clipping, or where the body of the exposure is. And that's an oversight. You know, the histogram needs to pop up above that, or this bar needs to pop up above that in the middle of the shot, or something needs to be done so that when I am adjusting some other parameter that's not automatically assigned to the dial here, that I'm not losing sight of the image assessment when I'm adjusting the image parameters. That needs to be seen. So that's another recommendation I have for the next firmware update or firmware updates in the future. We need to see that histogram all the time. So if I call up my shutter speed, I need to see the histogram. If I call up my ISO, I need to see the histogram. That it does not need to be hidden behind this mask. The mask could be put somewhere, or the histogram can be moved, one or the other, but that needs to be rectified. So then down here, you have your media. You can see your two different cards. It takes CFast and it takes SDXC, and more specifically, UHS-2 cards, which will do hundreds of megabytes a second. And you could bring that up, format your card. You get right to the card settings, and you can format your cards and do all your data in there. You can then also touch your audio meters right here, adjust your channel 1 input, channel 2 input, and your headphones. This is very fast, very fluid. I went from a DSLR, I took this on a shoot, and I just jumped headfirst into the water and tried to use this to do what I normally do with a Panasonic GH4. And I have to say, it went surprisingly well. It went better than I thought it would. Like I said, I missed the beeps for focus and start and stop. I had issues trying to see the screen because I couldn't tilt it to fix things. I had other issues with the battery. The battery died 3/4 of the way through. That was pre-6.1 update. Now with the 6.1 update, it would have lasted through my shoot, but me personally, I'm used to the GH4. I will go for hours on a single battery, and I would have loved to have a honking big battery. What I ended up having to do was I had a dummy battery to an external holder for the NPF batteries, and then I had this janky thing hanging off the outside. I was not a fan of that. The goal of this thing really is to solve problems for people who are using a DSLR and an external recorder. And the problem is this two-piece system, this stuff hanging off of your camera. This is the promise of the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K to me, is having that high quality image recording with a Micro Four Thirds sensor in a compact single unit form factor. Now, there's some caveats to that. I've seen people say, well, you can attach a USB-C SSD memory, and then you've got something hanging off the side. If you want to do that, you can, or you could just get big media and stick it inside. It's going to cost a little more, but that convenience, I feel, for me, that would be worth it. I don't want to have external media hanging off it. On the other hand, if you have to hand something off really fast for a client, it's nice to be able to like record to an external SSD and be like, here you go, take it with you. And that's great. Or you can hand, and it's a lot of media. You can get 500 gigabytes, a terabyte or more, and it's a lot more cost effective than CFast or SDXC at this point. Who knows? That'll change in 2 weeks. Anyway, continue around the back here. You've got, on the right-hand side, you've got a button for easy access to the high frame rate. So if you're shooting 4K 60, like I am most interested in, but you also want some slow motion, you can tap that and have it preset to 1080 120. That's, tap it, do your one shot, pop, tap it again, you're back to 4K. That's really nice. Unfortunately, on the back here, it does not tell you what your recording settings are. It doesn't say on the back here 4K 60. It doesn't say 4K 30, 4K 24. It doesn't say that. It says I've got a LUT going. It says I'm doing it 24 frames a second, but it doesn't tell me. I would like in that little 24 frames per second to say 4K P24 so that I have an additional confirmation of the settings of the camera, that I know things are the way I think they are. You've got a magnification, so you can punch in, you can punch out. That's really nice. Let's look at that over here. So you've got a magnification over here, so you can punch in, do manual focus and punch back out. You've got quick access to the menu, and then quick access to playback. Up here are two more quick access buttons. One is quick access to focus, which I won't use, and the other one is quick access to aperture, which is already on the dial, and as I've said before, that to me is something that you don't want quick access to. So that button I'm not going to use. These two buttons are dead to me. If I want to focus on something, I don't want to tell the camera just focus on something. I've gotten into the habit with the GH4 with the touchscreen, and with this camera with the touchscreen, I touch the part of the frame where I want it to focus so that I know it's focus. It's choosing what I want it to choose to focus on, not some really sharp detail in the background. I wanted to focus on the nose, the eye, something like that. So if somebody is turning on an angle, I'm going to touch here because I wanted to focus here, not on, this bright wire mesh behind me. So I know the camera is focusing where I tell it to, not where it picks. So just pushing a button and having it focus somewhere is not something I wanted to do. On top of the camera, let me bring this down here. Boop. And come over here. On top of the camera, you've got 3 function buttons that you can preset from a list inside. You got the big power switch. You've got a 1/4-20 thread. I would have loved to see a cold shoe, a nice durable cold shoe, but that's not here. This 1/4-20 thread also, it's not grippy. It's very slippery, and I screwed on a cold shoe, and I really had trouble getting it to like really lock down. I would have loved to see the extra pin that's becoming standard, an extra little hole so that you can screw down a shoe or an accessory and it screws into both the 1/4-20 and this other little pin that keeps it from spinning. That would have been great. There's an ISO, shutter, white balance, quick access. There's a shutter button, and the start stop record is right here and on the front. And that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. You know, yeah, Blackmagic can do what they want with those kind of buttons, but I mean, if you spin this around and look at the front of this camera, you know, if I'm reaching from the front, I could just as well reach this button, which is the same one my finger's on from behind, because it's actually closer than this button. Having these two an inch apart really doesn't, you know, whatever, you know. Continuing on the front, here's the dial. Here's a microphone for your right channel. Over here's a microphone for your left channel. And I will say that I am very impressed with the microphones built in here. The 6.1 update also improved the audio response. You get a little bit more audio without raising the noise floor. So kudos to Blackmagic for that as well. I was impressed because I used one wireless microphone plugged into the 3mm jack on the side here and one of the built-in mics. And I cranked up the built-in mic. And even though there's a fan that sucks air from the bottom and blows it out the top, doesn't exist on the audio. Just does not exist on the audio. I was very impressed with that. Also, technically, I don't know if this was intended, but by putting them smack dab in the middle of the camera on opposite sides of the lens, you actually get sort of a binaural audio recording in that sound from this side is physically blocked from hitting this microphone. Whereas if you have like an XY combination, both mics can kind of hear in all directions. This one, you're actually like your ears on your head. This ear is physically blocked from sound coming from this side. So you get the same thing going on with this camera, which is actually kind of impressive. You've got your little tally light on the front here so the people in front can see that you're recording. There's just the people behind, like me, we can't see. And then continuing around on the left here, you have all your ports. You have an 1/8" stereo microphone. You have 1/8" stereo headphones. You have a full-size HDMI. There's no locking pins or anything like that, unfortunately. You have a USB-C for media. You have your 12-volt in, which I'm using right now, and you have a mini XLR just for one channel. And again, I'm going to go into the audio settings on this camera because I'm also impressed with how Blackmagic did this. So let's jump into the menu here, close up. Let's jump into the menu here, go to the audio. So up here, you can say channel 1 source, channel 2 source. Now, you can have the 35mm on the right side, 35mm mono, or none. We're going to start over. Camera left. So you get the camera left, you get the camera right. Camera mono, it's going to take both microphones into the left channel. You're going to take XLR coming in line input. You're going to take the XLR coming in mic input. You're going to take the 35mm left coming in line, the 35mm right coming in line, the 35mm mono, both of them coming in line, 35mm left coming in microphone level, 35mm right coming in microphone level, 35mm mono coming in microphone level. I mean, that is just an insane amount of choices. I think that's almost maximum flexibility. There is one possibly firmware fixable, hint, hint, caveat to this that I find myself using, and I know others use it in the field, is that if you want to record protected audio, you have a shotgun microphone on a boom pole, or you've got a body microphone and it's coming in one channel, it's coming in the XLR, and you're sending the XLR to both channels on the recorder. What the Blackmagic camera does not let you do is you cannot record one louder than the other, so that one has a hot level, one has a very quiet level, so that if something happens really loud, that first channel would be clipping, but your second channel is protected. And then if things get very quiet and people are going to mumble, mumble, mumble as part of the scene, the second channel is gone, the first channel has it nice and clean. That is an additional feature that I would love to see coming in here. So what happens is, let me go to the same, 35mm right, 35mm right, and if we come over here, you'll see that I have them set the same, and if I move one, it actually moves both. So they're locked together. And I think that's what needs to change, so that you can take the same input and record it at 2 different levels on the 2 different channels in the recorder. That would be a wonderful additional recommendation from me, and probably other people too, for Blackmagic in 6.2, 6.5, a future firmware update for this. The menu system I find very nice to navigate, to get around. You can use ProRes, Cinema DNG, different recording settings. You've got your high speed, you've got your time lapse and other settings. I mean, so there's a lot of functionality built into here, and it's easy to find. I use the Panasonic, and things are all over the place. There is 8 pages on one heading alone, and then you've got other camera settings and wireless settings. It just goes on and on. Setup, it's nice that you can change the shutter angle to shutter speed. So for those, I'm used to shutter speed, other people are used to shutter angle. Pick and choose, use it how you want. And then with your presets, I found myself shooting film to get maximum latitude, but I wanted to see a little bit more contrast, so I loaded the built-in film to extended video, so it extends it a little bit, not all the way out, but it gives it a little bit more contrast, and that I found very helpful to me. You can load your own LUTs to the camera, and that way, if you've got something creative going on, but you want to shoot film, but you want people to see going out the HDMI, you want the client to see what it's going to kind of look like, and you can actually make creative choices on the spot. Hey, let's bring that light down a little bit so we don't blow this part with respect to this. You can actually fix, it's easier to fix things when you're shooting them than it is to fix them in post. It honestly is. And that is a nice capability of the screen. I liked that. And then of course you can also dial into this remotely, and I've seen apps where you can, with a cell phone, control the focus on the lens, and just having that additional capability capable within this camera is just even more icing on top of the cake. Underneath you get a single 1/4 thread, which is how I've got it mounted on the tripod, and there's a little carry strap. I don't know who somebody's going to carry out a carry strap, just as your casual little 4K ProRes RAW camcorder. But by and large, it's not a very big unit. It's very compact. It doesn't get hot to the touch. But it does, you're going to need a couple extra batteries, the little batteries, because it does use up the batteries. The battery door is a little janky, it's fiddly. It's not like, the battery door on the Panasonic or other cameras where it's like you put it pops open. It's reliable, and you can count on it. This one, I find myself fighting with it, but it's removable, so that maybe somebody else is going to come out with a third-party door that's better. That would be great. Or, like I said, the battery grip that'll hold 2 of these big batteries in there, and then I can have this thing run for 2.5 hours without issue. And hey, you know what? I would actually take that little bit of bulk over being worried about an hour or so, even though with the 6.1 update, that 1 hour plus is a huge improvement over what that same battery was doing a month ago. So that is great news. Kudos to Blackmagic for doing that. Kudos for Blackmagic for all of the updates in 6.1. It's just improved so many different facets, like the USB-C. I have a fellow of mine, he uses this camera, uses the Blackmagic Cinema, and he has one of the external USB-C SSD that if you leave it plugged in and mounted and you turn the camera off and then turn the camera back on, it ignores that card. With the 6.1 update, that's been fixed. So, longer battery, better audio, better compatibility with third-party products. Blackmagic did a fantastic job with the 6.1 update. It really improved several of the issues that it had. I think there's more work to be done. I've given several recommendations of my own that I think could, help the Pocket Cinema camera even more, become faster, more usable. And I think we all know and are, anxiously awaiting for Blackmagic RAW. That is going to be huge when you can shoot Blackmagic RAW in this camera have even more latitude, more capabilities in post, and without the huge overhead of Cinema DNG, and have it debayer in camera, have it easier, a little bit lighter work for the editing machine. That was not in 6.1, but it has been confirmed many times to me that that is on the roadmap for this camera, and I think that by itself will be another huge feather in the cap for the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. Yes, it's a long name, and it it bears repeating that it's a big name for a little camera because this little camera does so much. And the best part is, you know, I paid $1,800 for my GH4 years ago. Now you can get the GH5 or the GH5S, or there's Fuji cameras out there that are shooting, and Sony cameras that are shooting. You're going to look at around $2,000 and up for a good quality 4K recording digital SLR. And then all those digital SLRs are not recording ProRes or RAW video inside. You need an external recorder to make that magic happen, to fully realize the potential of the camera. That means this extra thing on top. And that extra thing is going to cost $700, $1,000 or more. So you've got $2,000, you've got $3,000 worth of hardware to do what this camera does for $12.99. That is amazing. It's even more amazing when you realize that purchasing this gives you a full copy of Resolve, which is $299, which means this camera by itself effectively costs $999. Less than $1,000. That is just mind-boggling. And for anyone who has a two-piece system and are looking at moving to another two-piece system, this deserves a really serious look. If you haven't yet invested and you're looking at the options, this deserves a serious look, a really serious look. A caveat that some people complain about is that it's a micro four thirds camera. Yes, it is. You know, it's not a 1-inch camera. It's not a camcorder camera. It's a micro four thirds sensor, which is not APS-C. It's not. But you can adapt APS-C lenses and full frame lenses to this sensor. You get additional light, and you get to keep the look and the bokeh of the larger lens on this smaller sensor. Yeah, there's people that are going to argue with me about that, but I think it looks just as good. The downside, though, for some odd reason, I have used my lenses, because I obviously have micro four thirds. I have used my lenses on this camera, and even though this is a micro four thirds powered mount, meaning they're part of the micro four thirds group, and they licensed the mount from Panasonic and Olympus, for whatever reason, lens correction wasn't part of the deal. I don't get that, because on my camera, I shoot my 7-14. I'm shooting real estate. I've got a super wide. I'm at 7 millimeters. And my lens is parallax. My verticals are vertical. Well, it turns out they're actually not. Panasonic does cut a few corners in lens design, compared to, like an L series Canon lens. And in so doing, they rely on the camera to fix it in post, as it were. The camera corrects the image, the geometry of the image. It corrects the chromatic aberration. It corrects sharpness. It corrects a bunch of things. Excuse me. And all of that capability was not part of the deal. I don't understand why not, because I found my 7-14 on this lens interior. It looked good, but it had slight bowing. It wasn't as sharp as I wanted it to be. It lacked that snap that I'm used to seeing when it's on my Panasonic camera, because the Panasonic camera does all that correction in camera before it records the image. Now, some would say, well, you can record RAW. Yeah, but I wasn't recording RAW. See, that's the thing. If you choose to record RAW, just RAW, whatever hits the sensor, then yeah, okay, you're going to get just RAW unfiltered lens hitting the sensor. But if you're choosing ProRes or something else, then it is processing the image. And if you're going to process the image, I want the camera to correct with the lens data that is available. I don't know if they have to pay extra to that, to Panasonic and Olympus, but for those people who are using powered lenses with autofocus, with image stabilization and everything, that lens correction should be part of the package. And I hope in the future, maybe another firmware update, optional package. Hell, I'll pay extra for it. You know, pay another $150 for lens correction data. I'm in. I would love to see that. For those people who are using Roncanon lenses or Vedra lenses or any sort of manual lenses, then yeah, that's all manual. So you're counting on the lens to be as good as it's going to be. But if you're using autofocus, image stabilized lenses for run and gun, for, you know, just because that's what you've got, then I want to see that lens correction happen in the camera when recording with ProRes or any future codec that does the processing in the camera. If you're doing RAW, okay, granted, it's not going to be corrected. But if you're doing processed recording, then we should have processed lens correction in the camera. And I think that's the last thing I've got to say about this camera. So I like the camera. I think it is a great option for almost anyone, unless you are a full frame diehard and you're looking at the full frame cinema cameras and the full frame DSLRs with 4K recording. Unless you're going in that direction, this is not on your radar. But if you're looking at APS-C or Micro Four Thirds, this has got to be in your comparison chart. This deserves a serious look because it is a whole lot of camera for the price. The price is really good, and the deliverable, the quality of the video that I got is what I wanted to get from this camera. It was clear, it was clean, it had some noise, but the noise was nothing at all like macro blocking and heavy MPEG compression that you find in DSLRs. And I'm not recording a colored subsampled image. I've got full color. I'm able to push and pull the image, and that is why, you know, you want to go to those higher end codecs, and now you can do it without going to external recorders with the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. Yes, I'll just walk through the whole name again. With that, this has been my walk around the P4K. My name is Anthony Barocas with AIBA Communications. Thanks for watching.